पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Can you make my tablet a co-host so that I can share my tablet also here? This is, what is the name? This also, the two names, Charan. Maybe. We can avoid seeing this whole thing.
Yeah, Pruji, I just did. Can you please check?
Can I? So happy to be here with all of you today. And I'll talk about a topic, you could say, on which I have no experience. So rather than talking specifically about parenting, because I don't want to be presumptuous and speak about something that I haven't done, but I'll talk about three broad things. First is the conception. What is the vision of relationships, specifically about parenting, the conception that is given in the Bhagavad Gita, in the broad Vedic traditions. Then I'll talk after that about the connections in the terms of what all resources we as parents have in our own moment. And then lastly, if we get time, I'll talk about our own convictions and how to specifically pass on those convictions. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, as we know, it's understood that each person is a soul. And our child is also a soul who has come to the world through our family. Now, in general, in parenting, across the world, there have been broadly two theories of parenting. One is the children are like soil. Now, the idea of if the child is like a soil, it's like not exactly soil, you could say clay. Clay means the parents can shape the child whichever way they want. So the clay is more or less passive. And the parents shape the clay the way they want. So this is one model of parenting. The other is that children are like seeds. Seeds means that each seed has to be taken care of for it to become a plant. But the seed has its own intrinsic characteristic. And the gardener can only get the seed to grow according to its whatever intrinsic characteristic is. So no amount of gardening can transform, say, a lotus seed into a rose flower or a apple seed into a mango. So that means, in this case, if you consider that the clay and seed metaphor can seem very similar, but they are radically different. Clay means the clay can be shaped into whatever shape the potter wants. Seeds means there's already the intrinsic potentiality. So across the world, there are different variants on this metaphor. And the idea is that in one side, the parental role and responsibility is far more. In the other, the parental responsibility is much lesser. Now, if we consider the Vedic tradition, there are two distinct things over here. This one. Do we have something else? Because if this chair is here, can move aside. Those are here, they can't see me at all. Then. Or maybe you could just turn the chair around and keep it tilted.
Like that. That's better. Thank you, Prabhu.
This fan can be moved aside also. Right. I don't need the fan so much. So now from the Bhagavad Gita's perspective, we understand that our existence is three level. The soul, mind, and body. Now the soul, of course, is eternal. The parents don't create the soul. As far as the body is concerned, the body is given by the parents to the children. And the body is largely shaped by their genes. So you could say the soul is eternal. The parents don't play much role in the soul directly. The body comes from the parents' genes to a large extent. Now, the term genes might not be there in the Vedic tradition, but the idea that children inherit the characters of the parents, especially at the physical level, that's very universally acknowledged. So now, as far as the mind is concerned, this is where things become interesting. Now, in the mind, there are samskaras. So these samskaras, many of them come from the past lives. Say all children cry when they are small. All babies cry. But there are some babies who cry as if they will bring the whole house down if they're not attended to. So there is a certain level of, we could say, more greater anger, or maybe a greater sense of controllership, not necessarily in the negative sense, but we can see difference in personalities even in small children to some extent. So the idea is that every child brings certain samskaras from the past. However, the mind is also impressionable, and impressions are formed from this life. So in Western psychology, there is this debate between nature versus nurture. That, say, for example, are leaders born or are leaders made? So is it that some people are born with natural leadership qualities, or can leadership qualities be developed by nurture? So now, in many of these questions, the actual answer lies somewhere in the middle. That if we consider nature versus nurture debate, if it's only nature, that means actually the parents can do nothing. If it's only nurture, means that the parents can do everything. And if any single problem comes with the child, that is all the responsibility of the parents. Now, the reality is in between, where there is nature plus nurture. Now, the nature, if we could consider in terms of samskaras, it is described as there are two kinds of samskaras. There are vrittis and vasanas. Now, the terms are often used differently in different cases. For vritti is, for example, associated with varna, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. And Krishna says in the Gita that this cannot be changed. This need not be changed, this should not be changed also. So we all see that our children may have some natural interest. Somebody has interest in music. Some children have interest in math. Some children have interest in language. And we cannot really force someone to get interested in something. Now, there can be interest that can certainly be cultivated. But at the same time, mostly there is some natural interest that is there. So the vrittis are samskaras from the past, which broadly indicate our inclinations. And these vrittis, they are broadly a part of our nature. Now we could say the vasanas are also part of our nature. The vrittis generally are considered positive. The vasanas are associated with kama, krodha, lobha, moha. So these are generally considered negative. So we could say that the job of parenting, in one sense, is to, with respect to the vrittis need to be, there has to be developed. And the vasanas need to be regulated. Regulated, hopefully by this, gradually they are reduced and removed. So, an important job of parenting, even when we consider that there's no such thing as, even if their parents are not spiritual. One of the most important words the child needs to hear is no. No, children will do all kinds of explorations. A child may want to play on the street where cars are going on. The parents will say, no, you cannot do this. So this no is, the children have impulses, and those impulses need to be restrained. So the vasanas, now sometimes when you use the word vasana, it can sound very negative, but it's just a reference to an impression. So there can be greed. A child, when food is served, all the food, not just one soap plate, one sibling's plate also child may want to take and eat it. Now, may say, okay, but the mother has to say, the parents have to say, okay, you want more food, we'll give you more food, but don't take from your sibling's plate. Now, why not? It's our home only, it's our family. Well, okay. But if that particular impulse, that particular vasana is not regulated, if you fast forward 20 years down the line, that kid is working in a company and there's a corporate dinner. So, if the child starts grabbing food from somebody else's plate, that would be mortifying. So, regulation is saying no. Regulate means set boundaries, basically. So, for the vrittis, you can set pathways or build pathways. How can the vrittis be developed? And how can the boundaries be set for the vasanas? So in this way, is there some nature? Yes. So vrittis come by nature, but even the vrittis need to be nurtured. The vasanas come by nature, but the child needs to be nurtured from them, not for them, but from them. That needs to be nurtured so that a child does not give in to anger, does not give in to greed, does not give in to, say, with us, illusion would be trying to lie or deceive others, those kind of things. So now, where does bhakti or spirituality come into this? So two things in this, that in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna in one sense differentiates between dharma and bhakti. He says, I come to establish dharma. Dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. That is 4, 7, and 8. And then after that, he says about bhakti in 4, 9, and 10. So it's like a funnel. The war was not fought in Kurukshetra to make everyone into devotees. In fact, it was not even a war between devotees and non-devotees, because there were devotees on the opposite side. And even in the Pandavas side, there was Drupada. Drupada is more of a Shaivite than a Vaishnavite. That Shiva was their family deity. So it was not a religious war, although the word Dharma Yuddha is used. Dharma in the Vedic sense has many different meanings, and one of the meanings is order. So the Kauravas were wrongdoers and they needed to be punished. So in one sense, Krishna says Dharma is mandatory. Dharma in the sense of basic law and order in society. If somebody is going to break law and order, that cannot be allowed. Bhakti is voluntary. It's very good if somebody practices bhakti, but bhakti is voluntary. Krishna says that I come to establish dharma, but then I inspire bhakti. I don't establish bhakti. Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvatah. Those who come to know about me, they become attracted to me, and then they come back to me. So it's like a funnel. Dharma is for everyone. Bhakti, Krishna also wants it to be for everyone, but everybody has to make that choice. Because nobody can, a person can't say whether I follow the speed limit or not, whether I'm on the right side of the road or wrong side of the road. That's not a matter of that's my choice. No, it's not a matter of choice. It's necessity. It will be imposed. So as parents, dharma in the sense of the basic do's and don'ts of life. These don't necessarily have to do anything with spirituality. Like children need to be trained so that they become disciplined, they become responsible, they become truthful. They're not untidy, they don't lie, they're not irresponsible. Those are basic virtues. So like the Daivi Prakriti and that Asuri Pravritti. So that do's and don'ts, developing that is the fundamental responsibility of parenting. Now, bhakti is something which cannot be forced. At the same time, just because bhakti cannot be forced does not mean that bhakti cannot be inspired. So bhakti, we cannot force bhakti. But at the same time, it is important for us to inspire. Now, can bhakti also be coming from previous lives? Yes, certainly. It is quite possible. And the Bhagavad Gita also says that those who are born in devotee families are likely to be souls who had already practiced bhakti in the previous lives. At the same time, sometimes it may happen that if we force bhakti on our children, and the result is that they may do it reluctantly because they initially they don't have any option, but afterwards they become resentful. So in one sense, if we consider the essence of bhakti is to remember Krishna. And remember Krishna means what? Basically, that we have joyful, rich memories of Krishna. And those memories become our default thoughts. Whenever we have nothing to think about, we think about Krishna. And in that way, at the moment of our death, also we'll remember Krishna. So essentially, bhakti means to make our memory our treasury. So our memory becomes our devotional treasury, for example. For a devotee, that a devotee's heart becomes filled with remembrance of Krishna. And that's how a devotee remembers Krishna at the time of death. So now for parents, the most important responsibility in that sense is to make sure that our children have happy memories of bhakti. How many specific rounds they chant, what time they wake up, how often, what all rules they follow, how much they fast on Ekadashi. All those things are important. But much more important is that when they grow into teenage, when they become young adults, when they look back at their childhood, they should not think, oh, the first thought when they think about bhakti, should, oh, I had to sit and chant for hours when I did like that. That should not be their first memory. Their memory should be that, oh, on Janmashtami, I performed this drama and we dressed up so nicely and we performed this act and so many people were watching and we did that and everybody applauded. It was such fun. So the idea is that the most important thing that we should be able to give happy memories to our children. Now, of course, not all memories will be happy because life doesn't work like that. However, the prominent memories need to be happy memories. So now, do we want our children to do specific bhakti practices and specific? Of course, we would like them to do that. But the point is that no matter how strictly we make them follow in their childhood, they are going to grow old and they are eventually going to make their own choices. And in one sense, that we could say that if we create the discipline within them right now, that they develop the habit every day of waking up in the morning, or every day they have the habit of chanting a particular number of rounds, then that habit will carry them forward. And that is true. But the problem is, if that habit can be done either reluctantly, they don't want to do it, or it can worsen to be done resentfully. Reluctant is like half-hearted. Resentful, I just don't want to do it. I want to find a way to escape from it. Now, both of these are negative. You could say this is negative square. And then they will give it up as soon as they can. The habit, if they develop it, all habits require a bit of pushing, no doubt. But when the habit is developed, over a period of time, they start liking it. So the habit is developed lovingly, and then it becomes likeably. We are loving in pushing them, and then eventually they themselves start liking it. So it is, we are loving, and they start liking it. So for example, we may find that many young children may not necessarily want to chant, but they love kirtans. We found this among our youth across the world, that they love kirtans. And many times the parents complain that, oh, I don't chant their rounds. Well, that may be true. But be happy that they're doing kirtans. And many of them do wonderful kirtans. So it's good that they have at least something they like in bhakti. So overall, the key point is to help them get happy memories. Now, when it comes to resources, it could be a big subject, but I'll make a few points over it. So I first said off what is the responsibility at a basic level of parents is to establish our children in dharma. That means basic virtues and vices. Virtues are established and vices are minimized. And as far as bhakti, we give them inspiration to practice bhakti by trying to cultivate as many happy memories as possible. So now, of course, we may say that children may complain at that time, but when they grow older, they'll be grateful for it. Yes, that is definitely true. But the problem is that if they feel very suffocated right now, then that suffocation may dominate them. And even when they feel grateful, they feel good about it, that negative memory will carry on. So overall, as we have to do it there's one boy, very intelligent boy, the American parents, devotee parents. He said that he is not a devotee, but he's favorable. And he's a good friend of mine. He said, my prominent childhood memory is my parents' constant disappointment that I was not the reincarnation of Prahlad Maharaj. Very biting that if you see Prabhupada's parents, let him be a child. Of course, he performed Rath Yatra, but if Prabhupada wanted a gun, parents gave him that gun. And Prabhupada said, I have got two hands, I want two guns. So his parents gave him that. But this is not just randomly or arbitrarily indulge in the children, but children will be children. Everybody goes through particular phases in their lives. And now, as far as resources is concerned, in general, like Chanakya Pandit talks about Panchavarshani Lali, Dashavarshani Tadayet, Prapte to Shodashe Varshe, Mitravad Acharit. So basically, the specific ages are not important, but what he says is that initially we pamper. Pamper means shower love on the child. We shower love in the early ages. So he specifically is till 5 and says till 15, we discipline the child. And then we treat the child, treat like a friend. Putram Mitravadacharit. The age, as I said, the specific age is not important, but the idea is there are very different approaches for different times. So small babies, they just need to be loved. As they grow older, they need to be more disciplined. But as they grow further older, in general, any relationship, we say, like a parent and a child. Initially, it's a very vertical relationship. After some time, it starts becoming a little more less vertical. Eventually, it will become far less vertical. Eventually, the child is married and has children and has their own job. It never becomes completely horizontal, but it does become, the parents cannot be constantly interfering in children's lives. So the relationship, the parent-child relationship does evolve. That's the point he's making over here. That we cannot treat a 20-year-old child the same way as you might treat a 2-year-old child or a 10-year-old child also. So now the resources, generally speaking, that when the children are very small, more or less they are largely under the control of the parents. The parents the children don't go out of the home without the parents' information, consent. Maybe in the parents' company only they go out. Or they go out with the parents, the parents are constantly aware where they're going. So we more or less have much greater control over our children at that time. And at that time, it's important that we give as many devotional impressions and memories, opportunities as much as possible. So after that, there is a phase of rebellion, teenage rebellion that comes up. and it's almost universal. And it's almost like this is the time when the children need the guidance the most and they want the guidance the least. They need it most and they want it the least. So at this time, what happens is if they are here, it's like an identity crisis for them. What is the identity crisis? If a child is very small, then now we may say everybody is a soul. That is true, but we also identify ourselves as I'm a software professional, I'm a mother, I'm an Indian, I'm a South Indian, like that. So for those children, before they come into teenage, they're so small that their primary identity is I am so and so's child. This is my mother, this is my father, I am this person's child. Now, once they grow older, they get a degree, they get a job, they will have their own identity. Now, when they are teenagers, they are too old to be satisfied with their identity connected with their parents, and they are too young to have their own identity. And that is the time they so identity based on parental relationship, that identity, they're too old for it. And their own identity, identity means, okay, who am I? I've done this degree, I got this job. Generally, unless the child is very extraordinarily talented, then it's difficult for them to have their own identity. This is where, in this phase, they are especially vulnerable to peer pressure. Oh, how do other kids? I want to belong to the group of other kids. And other kids are doing unhealthy habits or having anti-devotional activities, they may want to do those things. So at this time, or rather before this time, it's vital that they have peers who are also devotees. So while we are trying to give them bhakti, it is important that sometimes a bhakti can come from above. Do this. And this works in early childhood. But as they grow older, bhakti has to come more laterally from their peers, from those who they will immediately look up to. That's why if there are some programs where devotee kids get together and say older devotee kids guide younger devotee kids. The older devotee kids may not be practicing bhakti exactly the way the parents may want, but still they're practicing in their own way. And that has the maximum effect. Because at this particular point, what is given vertically, it comes with the baggage. This is my parents telling me to do it. So then that's some natural rebellion over there. Why should I do it? But if they see there are other kids like this, that's why if we have kids from devotees from different places, different communities, if they come together for some yatra in Mayapur, or nowadays many kids are forming these initiatives where, at least I know in North America, in Australia, there are just kids coming from various places and they come together. Now they may not have a very intense bhakti kind of yatra, but they have their yatra. They do in North America. There is a whole group of devotees. They in their summer vacation, they get a bus party, and the kids, there's one person who operates the bus, but they go around the country. They visit various temples. They distribute books. They go and see various places also. It's not entirely spiritual, but that solidifies their bhakti much more than anything else. So at that age, this horizontal or lateral works much more than vertical. Now, what resources we can create for that? That is always a challenge. But if we have that vision, like there's one kid who is good, then that we don't have to beat other children down with the example of that child. Why are you not like this? Why are you not like him? Why are you not like him? Why are you not like her? But just let that child be a natural model for them. So that's one thing about peer groups. You cannot avoid the influence of the peers for the children. But if they can have a healthy peer influence, that's very helpful. Now, with respect to schooling, I'll make a couple of points over here. Now, when Broadly, you could say there are two options. There are traditional options, which is like a Gurukul or something like that. And there are contemporary options. Contemporary options means we have the modern education system. Now, devotees have tried to create initiatives both ways. Devotees have tried to create Gurukuls, which are completely traditional in their education. And we focus on that primarily. And of course, they learn basics. But the idea is that they learn our tradition primarily. Now, contemporary schools is where devotees either our devotees just go to normal schools, or we create some devotional facilities within the existing schooling system. Like here, the Krishna Avanti schools are there. So it's more of a contemporary education, overall infrastructure is there. But within that, we are trying to create some bhakti. So now you could say in between these two, to some extent, if you consider is homeschooling. Homeschooling is where we try to, within our home, give a traditional atmosphere to children. But there is also what we are teaching them in is the contemporary education system. So in general, while the idea of a traditional education can seem very attractive for parents who are very serious in bhakti, whether that education system will work today, that has to be very carefully evaluated. That means that while we want our children to become devotees, but if they choose not to become devotees, we hope they don't do that, but if they choose not to become devotees, they should not blame us that in the name of bhakti, we did not help them get a career. Now, traditional schooling systems can also help people have a career, but the career might be in a particular way, and that the children may not be happy with that. So hopefully, Gurukul systems will develop. But as far as I have seen, it is a challenge with respect to Gurukul systems, how well that will work. The advantage is that there is a very immersive system. Now, traditionally, the Gurukuls were residential. But if you really go back to or 500, 600 years and study the Gurukuls, it's like a very small Gurukuls. So every village would have its own Gurukul. And generally, it would be run by some couple in the family, in the village itself. And it might be on the outskirts of the village, slightly further away, but there were 10, 15, 20 kids, and the guru would be there, the guru's wife would be there. And they would be like surrogate parents, like substitute parents, basically. But when we have huge schools, it may be 100, 200, 500 children, and then whether the children get the proper care over there, that is a challenge. So if the children don't feel deprived of parental love, now of course there are hostels and kids go to that, children go to that, but generally children go to hostels when they're older, not very young. So they should not be deprived. So over a period of time, the Gurukul system, if and when it works out, something which will be very decentralized, rather than one Gurukul from where all devotees from everywhere go, whether it's Vrindavan, Mayapur. Ideally speaking, if something is established locally, then they're not completely cut off from the parents, but at the same time, they have an atmosphere which is like a family. So there's always this tension between, it's like spiritual well-being and material well-being. Now, ideally speaking, parenting means we want to give them both. We want to promote the spiritual well-being also and the material well-being also. Now, if the spiritual well-being is insisted or is facilitated at the cost of material well-being, then it can backfire. Now, on the other hand, if material well-being is facilitated and spiritual well-being is not, then also we are, in one sense, failing in our responsibilities. But at the same time, if you remember that there's a difference, that the material well-being is a fundamental responsibility. Spiritual well-being, we want to provide all the facilities. But at the end of it, the child has to decide what they want to do. So in the modern education system, the education itself is not so much a challenge as the culture around the education. The education is more or less okay. They're not much spiritual education, but it is what it is. And it equips people to function in the world today. But the challenge is really the culture that comes around it. So there are devotees who are trying to establish schools where we can have a better culture and we don't have to completely go against the education system. So each set of parents and children will need to decide what works best. I don't think there's any one thing that works for everyone. Each child is an individual, each parent is an individual, and each family is in their particular individual situation. There are many devotees who try homeschooling. There's also some who try something like collective homeschooling. That means a group of families come together and try to do some things. And some of those are very successful. So in Silicon Valley, in America, many devotees are doing homeschooling. So Radhika Raman Prabhu is his mother, Aruda Mataji, is actually written a series of books about how to teach children. Quite well written books. And she travels around inspiring people. Urmila Mataji has written a set of books and about teaching children basic skills through Krishna conscious books. So different devotees have prepared different resources. Now homeschooling, it's easier if there is a community around it. So at Australia, I've seen there are 4 or 5 families, they stay nearby each other. And then all the kids are we homeschool together. All the kids are more or less the same age. And it's working quite nicely. So different, mostly the mothers take care of the teaching and the fathers also sometimes. But different mothers teach different subjects. So it's not too much responsibility on one parent. So this has to be done very carefully. I think, if homeschooling is to be done, it's good to have not just the inputs, but like a regular guidance from someone who has gone through that journey. And over a period of time, if a community grows, it's best if the community can build its own schools. That is a very vital resource. In 2-3 places in America, in Florida, we have in Alachua, it's a very small place. It's a retired devotee community. But there they have quite a good school. And just because they have a school, devotees from all over America are relocating there. So their like congregation is growing without any preaching. So, and not just devotees, even Indian parents also, they want their children to grow up. So if we can create a good school, that it also becomes a good engagement for the parents, and especially often education is supported in the Western world. So you also get salary and everything. So it is a huge endeavor, but if it works, that's very nice. Now I'll talk about the last part briefly because we'll have some questions afterwards. So as far as developing the philosophical appreciation among the children, the 2 things I would say over here. First is that especially the children start becoming teenagers. In general, everybody has a mana and everybody has a buddhi. So what happens is, with time, in one sense, the mana grows faster. The buddhi also grows, but buddhi goes slower. That means mana growth means in the mind there are desire, there are emotions, there are impulses. They grow faster. But in the buddhi, there is the reasoning capacity to ask logical questions. That also grows. So kids in their teenager, once they come into teenage, on one side their desires grow, and because of that, they may want to explore various things. But along with that, their reasoning capacity grows. And at that time, when they will ask questions about whatever they have been practicing. And generally, I have seen very good educational material available for children where we tell them Krishna stories, tell them to memorize shlokas, we help them develop, learn mridanga and other things. And all these are good. These are, even from a material perspective, children are learning things which they can show to their other kids. Nowadays, with the diversity kind of thing, a child who learns Bharatanatyam, a child who learns some musical instruments, all these are for my tradition. That's quite attractive for them. But till now, I have not seen very good material prepared to answer questions logically. So we have a lot of good material for you could say children who are below 10, 11, 12. But in between, when serious logical questions come up, at that time, there are many questions whose answers we assume. But children come from at that age, they are questioning everything. So we need to either ourselves be prepared, or we need to help others be prepared. We need to have others who are prepared. One of the sessions that I do is if we have session only with teenagers, well, no parents allowed. And then what we do is we ask questions. If you are to share your share about Krishna consciousness with your friends in school. So what aspects of Krishna consciousness do you feel comfortable sharing? And what aspects of Krishna consciousness do you feel uncomfortable sharing? And then we ask kids to form small groups, 3, 4, 3, 4. If there are 15, 20 children, then 4, 5 groups to form. And I ask all of them to make a list and present. And it's quite revealing. Now, what happens if I ask them, what are you uncomfortable about? It becomes a little bit, will you question me? Will you doubt me? So, and if it's one person we ask, if it's a group, it becomes a group presentation. And what do you feel uncomfortable sharing with others and why? Okay, we tell them that it was interesting. Where was I recently? I was here in UK only at one place, and they said that this first time I heard this, that, we feel very embarrassed that we worship animals as gods. No, I not heard this. At least in India, it doesn't come up. In North America, also, it didn't come up. Okay, so I thought, okay, this is an interesting question. I'll give some answers. So basically, now the questions that they are not comfortable sharing with others, that means they themselves don't have conviction. And it may not be that they don't have conviction, just that even if they have conviction, they just don't know how to answer the questions. So trying to equip them logically is important. And Prabhupada also says that when we are teaching our tradition, that there is teaching tradition based on scripture, and there is teaching tradition based on logic. So now I will make I'll make 2 points here. See, broadly, there is communication of different kinds. There are insiders and there are outsiders. So now there is insider to insider communication. That means, say, we may have something like Bhagavatam class or Bhakti Shastri course. Somebody is doing Bhakti Shastri means they have already become a devotee. And they are now wanting to know more about a tradition. So that is insider to insider communication. Now there is also insider to outsider communication. This is what we call as preaching or outreach. Now there is also outsider to outsider communication. This largely is based on our reputation. So it's that what do outsiders think about us? Say if somebody wants to come to a ISKCON temple and they ask their friend, what do you think about visiting this place? Oh, those people are very pushy. They'll ask you for money. They won't leave you in peace. They'll force you to do this. Okay. Oh, it's a very nice place, very peaceful. You can get free prasad, nice kirtan over there. So this outsider to outsider communication is very important. In many ways, we as a movement have neglected that. So then there is outsider to insider communication. That is more for our, you could say, social awareness. That what do outside people think about? Or what do people think and why do they think in the way they do? So in general, when our children grow up, in the moment, we treat them as insiders, and that's natural. So most of our communication to them is insider to insider. But over a period of time, as they grow up, they're interacting with outsiders. And in some ways, they will have questions which they get from outsiders. So what happens in one sense, our children are insiders initially, and we hope they're insiders always, but they become outsiders in the sense that they have to interact with outsiders. And not only they interact with outsiders, they also they don't want to be the odd person in the outside circle. So they also act like outsiders to some extent. So for our children also, to some extent, this outreach has to be done. Like, we don't treat our children like outsiders, but that, okay, if they were outsiders, if a neighbor's child would be there and they had some questions, how would we answer those questions? So that way, the system of education. So try to see where the children coming from, what are the kind of questions they're having. And I'll talk one more point about how I try to look at Shastra now and how I try to address issues. So as was mentioned in the introduction, I comment on movies. So when the first question comes up, people ask me, do you watch those movies? So since my childhood, I was actually never much interested in movies. That I would like to read books more. And I was very interested in cricket, but I found watching cricket boring. I like to read cricket analysis. After the match is over, not just a report of the match, but some commentators, they analyze, they go deeper into that. So that's what I like. So I like reading movie reviews much more than I like watching movies. But the point is that, so when I have written a whole article about movies as an example I'm giving, but this principle applies to many things. That Krishna consciousness has two different aspects to it. One is bring Krishna into our consciousness. And that is what normally we think. We hear about Krishna, we chant Krishna's name, we take darshan of Krishna, we bring Krishna into our consciousness. But the other aspect is bring what is in our consciousness to Krishna. There are some things already in our consciousness, we can't just erase them. So we bring what is in our consciousness to Krishna. So especially the Gita, chapter 10 about Vibhuti is this principle. That there are things which are attractive in this world. There are things which are impressive. They'll naturally be in our consciousness. So how can we see those things in connection with Krishna? So when we live in the world, there'll be certain things which will naturally be in our consciousness. It could be about politics, it could be about movies, it could be about sports, it could be about various events that happen in the world. So is there a way to bring these in connection with Krishna? Now, our movement in the first generation began more or less as what is called a monastic movement. Monastic movement means everybody who joined the temple started living in the temple, when Grahasthas were living in the temples. And at that time, almost like joining a temple meant becoming an insider, becoming a devotee meant moving into the temple. So the idea was there's no need to be involved with the world. But now it's not like that. Now most of our devotees, the congregation devotees, they have careers, they have not just family, but extended family, they have profession, they live in a society, and you have to interact with the world. Our kids have to interact with them. So there are certain subjects that people talk about. There are certain issues that people raise. So is there a way we can address those issues and bring what is in our consciousness, what is in our children's consciousness to Krishna? So that is a challenge which has not been developed much. But In many ways, Prabhupada himself set the example when Prabhupada didn't directly comment on movies. Movies were not that big in 1950s and 60s. That way. But Prabhupada would comment on news at that time. The old back to college magazines, 1944, 45, 46, the Second World War was going on. Almost, because 60-70% of the articles, very few articles were direct philosophy. Most of them were, like the Prabhupada would take a quote from some newspaper editorial, some quote which say, I think Einstein had said about Gandhi, and Prabhupada would quote about that and then talk about Gandhi and Bhagavad Gita. So Prabhupada was looking at current affairs and giving a Shastra Chakshu on current affairs at that time. Now, of course, later on, Prabhupada focused directly on Shastra and he got an audience which is directly interested in Shastra. But that feature of Vedic, what we call as Vedic observer, that is still then back to Godhead, and it's an important feature. So how can we connect what people are already interested in with Krishna? What is already in people's minds? So for this, I talk about this insider to insider, insider to outsider. These four things I talked about. So when we are talking about something, how do outsiders see this? Sometimes it's important that we understand the outsider perspective. Not because we agree with it, but because we want to be able to communicate with them. We can easily label them, oh, this is demoniac. Well, okay, but why do people think in this way? Is there some reasoning behind it? The reasoning may be wrong, but when we understand the reasoning, then we can address that reasoning. So generally, when we take Shastra, and okay, how would an outsider look at this? How do we find it out? One way is that, would I feel comfortable sharing this with the outsider? If I spoke this point to somebody, a colleague in my office, how would they take it? Okay, now we may not be able to predict accurately, but still you say, I don't think they will be interested, they will appreciate this point. So then if that is a key point, then okay, how can this be made intelligible? So for example, I'll take two examples, I'll conclude this. Say vegetarianism. Now, we could talk, why should we eat vegetarian food? Why should we not eat meat? Anybody who cooks and eat meats will go to hell and will be cooked like that in hell's fires. Now, we could talk about Kumbhi Pak and Maharav. Now, that is a perfectly valid scriptural explanation which will make utterly no sense. So now we could give a scriptural explanation why we shouldn't eat meat, but we can give a logical explanation. Logical explanation, we can talk about how there's so much violence to animals. And most people are nowadays very soft-hearted about animals. So why hurt animals? That actually argument wins over most people. So we can also talk about the health effect, health benefits. We can talk about environmental benefits. So I use an acronym called HELP. There's a whole article on this in my website. HELP is health, environment. It's better for our health. It's better for the livestock. The animals don't have to suffer so much. And it's actually better for the global poverty also. Because we have finite amount of land. That land is used for human grains, or grains for human beings rather than fodder for animals. Poverty can also be addressed. So we can give logical reasons. Prabhupada said when he started the Bhakti Vriksha Institute for Scientific Outreach, he said that try to give logical explanations. That if we say this consciousness doesn't come from matter, it comes from something spiritual. So if you're speaking with scientists, you have to give logical explanations. So sometimes we have to search around to find logical explanations for this. And there are devotees who are good at this, and we try to hear them more, connect with them. I have, for different areas, I know different devotees are good at it. So when I have some issues to discuss, I have some answers to some questions, but I know that I would like to get some further insight or just have some sounding board. So for particular issues, I'll talk with one devotee. For another issue, I'll talk with another devotee. And that way we build our resources. We try to come up with logical answers. So the key to recognize logical answers is that try to think like an outsider. So if we do that, how do you think like an outsider? Think how I would speak this to a complete outsider. Just a colleague who has no knowledge about bhakti, what would they think about? So when we start that, then gradually we ourselves will be able to come up with explanations that start making that will appeal to people, that will make sense to people. I think I mentioned that in one of the classes. That Prabhupada says, what is realization? Your realization means that what is scripture and what are the interests of the audience. We need to be able to find an intersection between the two. So I was in Australia and we have a completely Aussie temple at one place. So one of the temple president was telling me that when people come to the temple, it's Australians only come mostly, Indians don't come there to that particular temple. He said that one lady, she came and he asked, he said, when you blow the conch, when you blow that conch, why does everyone kiss the floor? Now, we wouldn't think of anybody kissing the underworld and kissing the floor are completely different things. But that's how they see it.
See like that.
They see like that. So now to see from an outsider's perspective, it is not easy, but it is possible. If we generally, when you talk, we can talk to people, we can talk with people, or we can talk at people. Talk at people means what? People are just objects and I'm throwing speech at them. But talk with people means, okay, they hear and then we hear what they are going to say, what they understood, what they didn't understand. When Prabhupada came to America initially, it is said that Prabhupada, Sally Agarwal, the host of Prabhupada in Butler, Pennsylvania, she says Swamiji was interested in everything American. Swamiji wanted to know how the vacuum cleaner worked, how the washing machine worked, how the the local, whatever they call it, local worked over there. So now Prabhupada did not go to America to learn how a vacuum cleaner worked. But Prabhupada wanted to understand how the American mind worked. And he was learning about these things at a practical level to function, because he wanted to be able to do those things if it is required. Another level, he wanted to understand how American people thought at that time. So we talk with people, we speak certain things, and we listen to them. So generally, one of the challenges parenting is that we talk to our children, but we don't talk with our children. Listen that, okay, if a child says, okay, something interesting happened in my school today. Now at that time, the child is, many times we feel that our children, especially when they become teenagers, they don't talk with us. They seem to suddenly become like uncommunicative. But if you want to talk something, if we are available, and we don't immediately judge, how could you think like this? How could you do like this? Okay, listen. What are they thinking? What are they doing? Or what were they thinking when they were doing something? Then we'll start talking with them. We'll start understanding what kind of questions they have, what kind of issues they come up with. And then those issues can be gradually addressed. So this is a whole area of work, but trying to think like an outsider, because our children are from insiders, not becoming outsiders, but interacting with the outside world. That helps us see things from a different framework and then try to address those things from that framework. So when we do that, then we can equip our children intellectually to study scripture and to not just understand scripture from a traditional perspective, but understand scripture even from a contemporary logical perspective, so that they can confident in presenting it. Well, summarize.
Give an example on that one. Like understanding the scriptures and also helping them to relate with the outside world. Can you just give us an example?
Yeah. So, for example, in many kids, they told me that what you're comfortable doing or comfortable doing. They said, I'm quite comfortable doing kanti, but not tulsi, not the tilak. I asked them, how do you explain it? He said, this is tulsi and this is the feet of God and it is Krishna. It's just too difficult to explain. Kanti seems like a stylish thing to me. And kids have so many. The Kantimala is such a stylish thing now. There's so many variants of them. So I told them that generally speaking, whenever we are sharing our spirituality with others, try to phrase it in as universal a way as possible. As universal a way as possible. So the way I explain this is that the tulsi, that this is a leaf, and this leaf represents nature. And in our tradition, this is considered to be this symbol is considered to be a blessing of God, in the blessing of the Lord, in the form of his foot. The idea is that our body is a result of the blessing of nature and God. And we express our gratitude, our acknowledgement that nature and God are at synergy in our existence, are together facilitating our existence, blessing our existence. This is something which, going to Tulsi, Tulsi is very specific. Krishna is very specific. Now, sometimes you don't even have to go into that. This is the foot of God. This symbol represents the divine for us. So the divine and nature, they are unified. Now, is that a traditional explanation? It is not. But is it contrary to the traditional explanation? No. It is basically what is specific, we try to make it as universal as possible. So, for example, we may use Hare Krishna mantra chanting, we can use mantra chanting or mantra meditation, or like we use our musical meditation for kirtans. So what are we doing is we're just trying to take the same term and same concept and make it as universal as possible. So it's if you just think a little bit about it, there are many ways in which we can do that. And once we start doing that, then people see nowadays what I've seen, people are not very judgmental or critical because of the whole culture of diversity and inclusion. So, but people are curious. And if you just give them an explanation, with respect to explanation, there are many degrees. At a basic level, it's an intelligible explanation. Intelligible means, okay, I understand where you're coming from. I may not agree with you. At least I can make sense of it. Then beyond that is an acceptable explanation. Okay, I agree with it. It's agreeable acceptance. I agree with you on this. I may not agree with you, but I understand where you're thinking from. And beyond that, there's an irresistible explanation. That is like a knockout argument. Yeah, you are right, and I agree with you, and I'm on your side for minutes. So even if we can't get people to the level of irresistible or even acceptable, at least intelligible. If it is other experience, it is an unacceptable. How can you think like this? How can you do like this? Even other things before that is incomprehensible. I can't figure out you guys. I don't know why you do what you do. Incomprehensible. Okay, you do what you want to do. I don't care. Okay. But unacceptable is the way you are, we just can't accept it. I think there are ranges over there. So I think we need to get people at least to the intelligible level. So the key is take from the specific and make it as universal as possible. And now we can have specific terminology in our own tradition when we speak insiders, but outsiders try to speak it as universal as possible. So for example, inside our tradition, we use brahmacharis. Outside, we use monks. The word monk has become very cool now in many ways. So that Prabhupada is not a word that Prabhupada used, but it's perfectly fine word because there's nothing wrong with it. So try to find out for everything as universal a word as possible.
In that way, we kind of help our children to connect with the outside
Yeah,
world.
we help the children to connect, yes. And so what we are doing, they don't feel strange or they don't feel strange that they feel embarrassed. Because they feel embarrassed to tell others what I'm doing. So I'll summarize what I discussed. I just called it.
The conviction part you said that is
Sorry?
the conviction part.
Conviction, I said, this is how, when we actually present things, help them to understand things in a logical way by ourselves, by positioning ourselves as outsider. And that's when we can help them get that conviction. Now, of course, there's an intellectual conviction, there's spiritual conviction. Spiritual conviction comes with the practice of bhakti and the experience of Krishna that we can't control. But I'm talking about the intellectual conviction. So I'll summarize what I discussed. Talk about the responsibility and the resources, or rather, let me start with, first I talked about the conception of parenting. The children are not like clay, nor are they like seeds. There's a part of them which is like a clay, like say if you consider the vasanas, they have to be reduced and removed. But then the vrittis, they are like seeds. And the vrittis, they need to be developed. And then we talked about how at one level, dharma is universal. Dharma is mandatory, bhakti is voluntary. So in parenting also, like giving our children basic virtues is very important. And then giving them devotion is important also. And quite often virtues and devotion go together. But you need to be careful of what is first. And then we talk about the resources that are available for this. And we have the concept, how do we help them develop the connections? So initially, it's much more vertical. Initially, the parenting relationship is, say, much more vertical, but over a period of time, it starts becoming more and more horizontal. So that means that here we can give instruction more and more. But as they grow older, we need to give more and more explanation, more and more vision we need to. And here also I talked about that influence when they're a teenage, the peers are very influential for them. So if you can help them have spiritual peers, that's very helpful. And then lastly, conviction. So it is like we will initially we'll give them insider to insider explanation. And that's what is required. But eventually, we need to be able to give them insider to outsider kind of explanation also. So here, this is where, here it's more like we're teaching scripture in a traditional way. But here we need to teach scripture in a logical way. And so one way is we try to position ourselves as outsider and try to see how we can answer. And one thing we could do is, that whatever is specific, we try to phrase it in universal terms. And we can learn from various devotees who are doing these things. Gradually, as we ourselves become more equipped, that we help their intelligence to become equipped to answer these questions. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions or comments?
This insider to outsider connection, the logical, is that part of I'm just thinking of from what age do you start that? Is that part of your journey of raising a kid from the start? Or is it recommended from a particular age? Because they also start interacting.
I think it's, see, in terms of concept, all these categories are very easy to understand when we talk about conceptual. But when in real life, it's not that the categories are not the black and white, but just getting a map is helpful.
Apply that accordingly.
So Krishna Lila stories, they're nice to hear. And kids may enjoy it. But how many of Krishna Lila stories can kids tell their friends? And we say, okay, this is a story in our tradition, that's fine. Oh, Krishna is our God, he lifted a mountain. Now, 5 or 6, 7-year-old child will be happy telling it to his kids, friends. But probably a 12 or 13-year-old child will feel embarrassed. You believe that? You believe that stuff? What kind of person are you?
Take the conviction.
Yeah. So it's a gradual thing. So I think it's as per need based. Some children are more logical. All children may be curious, but curiosity can also be different things. The curiosity is not necessarily about logical things. It's curiosity, okay, no, what is this? What is this? What is that? That kind of curiosity is there. Those children who have more logical faculty developed, they need more of attention.
Because one of the other issues that we see, I'm sure, world around is the conversion into the other religions. I think that equipping our children is very important, isn't it? Otherwise, we see people are being converted into other religions. We cannot blame others because we've not equipped our children.
Yeah. I think there are many reasons for conversions happening, but one of the main reasons you put your finger on is that we have not equipped our children. Another thing is that often children feel that our practices or our culture, our tradition is too otherworldly, and others seem to be more relevant. It depends on, what are you doing for the world? So we just want to get out of this world and go to God. So the relevance of our tradition, it has to be presented properly. So especially, no. So a couple of things I have seen in two places in America, they did that, like we have this Food for Life program. They had once a month, they have the kids, like many of our Indian children, they have brilliant. The parents who come from India to abroad, they already are very good. Otherwise, they will not succeed in coming abroad and settling over here. So the children are brilliant. So what happened was around 12, 14, 15 kid, the age, they told those kids that once a month, you have to manage the entire Food for Life. And it's a big responsibility. The kids took it up. And they not only took it up, they like to tell that to their friends. They might want to like to tell that we go to a temple. But we go to underprivileged areas and we serve food to people. That's something which they can add to their CV. That's something which they can tell their, not just, they may not want to tell all their friends, but they can tell their teachers. So basically, we can see within our tradition, what are the things that the kids will feel comfortable telling their friends, that their peers. And so these kind of activities, nowadays, the children, especially in school, there's a lot of emphasis on activism, like volunteering, contributing to some cause. So if we can facilitate that, then that's very helpful. There's one temple in America where they have once in 3 months, the entire Sunday feast program is run by kids. Even the lecture is given by a kid. The kirtan is done by a kid. And of course, the kids are not Brahmanish, they can't go to the altar and do the puja. But the kirtan is led by the kids. The prasadam is served by the kids. They even have their large community. The kids cook the food also. So, the kids may miss all of the Sunday feast, but they don't miss this one. They love coming. So, what happens is they need to feel a sense of ownership. It's not a sense of, this is the place where I am ordered about. I have to order and I have to, this is the place which is my place. So somehow, not all children, but many children have that sense of wanting to do something which they can talk about with others. So even if we take our children to India, now we can take them to Vrindavan, but maybe we can take them to the Vrindavan school where there are orphan children, the orphan girls, and children can serve food over there. And that's something which they will feel good about. They're getting good samskars. They can talk about it. I went to India and I served food to poor people. So that's the point of realization. What aspects of our tradition will they feel comfortable sharing with others? There will always be some aspects which they will be uncomfortable about. But if we can make sure that what they feel comfortable sharing about is more than what they feel uncomfortable sharing about, then it won't be that much of a problem.
Sir, there are some
Online
urgent
questions.
microphone.
Continue to go to ask the questions.
2% attack பண்ணா வேண்டாம் ஒரு பக்கம் தான் விளையாடுவாங்க
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu.
Thanks for this wonderful class, and we've given quite a lot of information, which is very useful. I have got few teenage children in my teen baby, and all those children are their parents also into KC, and then they nicely grow up as children come from the KC background. What I am struggling at the moment is that the parents' expectations are around when I conduct classes or lessons, they believe that we have to only go around Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita slokas. Then they feel that their children are having KC class or B. I'm a social worker by profession, and I'm a specialist in children and family sector. I've been a social worker for the past 35 years. So I've been working with various children inside and outside the UK, and there are children from other part of the world as well. So I understand that these children needs to be accepted as who they are, rather than expecting them to be as a devotee that I'm having connection or doing some work with them. The struggle that I am experiencing is that there are parents who are still function like children. Of course, everyone has got those three elements of parent, child, and adult. So the parents have their own competitive, they're in the competitive world. In the UK, especially in East London, we have this disease called 11 plus. And they are very proud about, some parents are very proud that their children are going to grammar school, and some devotees children unfortunately couldn't get through. Then there is a discrimination or inequality among themselves. They themselves identify that they are superior, and the children who didn't get their admissions are inferior. And the children are seeing those things. So as a devotee, we all are supposed to be respecting each other without making any, what to say, aparat. And they're all attending classes. The seniors are giving nice classes. They tell how we should avoid causing any aparat on each other. But without their knowledge, they are doing this. So the question here is that how are we going to help these parents to become parents rather than being a child? Because they are the ones struggling to accept things as it is, and then they are putting pressure on their children or telling them that you are a failure, you are useless.
Yeah.
So which is very sad.
Yeah,
And
so
sometimes some children are.
Over here that it's a that is with respect to parenting, that it's always this tension between doing too much and doing too little. That means having too much authority. This is, I am the parent and you have to do this, having too much expectation. The other is giving too much autonomy. So in general, Western parenting is about giving too much autonomy to children. It's their life, what they want, they do it. When I first came to America, I was staying at one devotee's house in 2014. And it was quite a culture shock. They had a young teenage daughter. And I asked them, so she was, I think, in 12th. So what is she going to do after 12th? So then the husband looked at his wife. We have never asked her till now, have we? So now in India, asking you, probably this 5th, 6th standard, only the planning starts what you do after 12th. Isn't it? So sometimes I feel it's too much autonomy. Now, generally, the Eastern model, I would say it's only Indian. Chinese is also like that. And the Eastern model is sometimes there can be too much parenting, helicopter parenting or something like that. But overall, if we see, Indians are in the Western world among the most successful demographics, financially successful, familially successful. And there's one devotee, American devotee, who is a traffic cop. And he says that when we pull over kids, if they're speeding, often these kids are drunk, the kids are violent. So if I pull a car over and it's an Indian kid, it's very rare. The Indian kid I pull over, I just tell him, what is your parents' phone number? Give me. And that's enough for that kid to become scared. No, don't tell my parents. I'm really sorry. So my point is that there is a certain value in having authority and having boundaries and having expectations. Now, we may say we should not judge each other, but the world is a judge, nature is a judge, and judging is going to happen anyway. There is a law of nature in the animal world, the survival of the fittest. In the human world, also, there's something similar. So, there are some children who are more talented and they're going to be more successful. There's some children who are going to be less talented and they're going to be less successful. Now, it could be that they're less talented in one area, they may be talented in some other area. So now how parents come to accept the children, that is a challenge. So basically what happens is everybody needs self-worth. The self-worth can be extrinsic or it can be intrinsic. Now, if the parents are to foster intrinsic self-worth, then we need to look at what the efforts the children have put. If the parents want to foster extrinsic self-worth, parents focus on the results that the kids have got. So karmanyevadhikaraste is not just to be applied for ourselves, it's to be applied to our children also. That if a child may have put in good effort, but maybe the child does not have that much talent as some other children have, and it's natural. Bhima did not have as much talent in archery as Arjuna had. And Arjuna did not have as much talent in archery in mace fighting as Bhima had. So different people have different degrees of talents. So if as parents we foster extrinsic self-worth in our children, then they will be insecure lifelong. So at one level, we may be fostering extrinsic self-worth, and that may make them go out of their way to please us. And we may think that's good. I want their good and they try to please me, that will be good for them. But if they feel always insecure, if they're not able to please their parents, then in future, they may enter into a relationship where they become too dependent on the other person in the relationship. It's becoming a very unhealthy dynamic. People can end up very insecure. So extrinsic self-worth, it's a formula for insecurity. It's a recipe for insecurity. Because the person is always dependent on how many marks I got, how much bank money I have in my bank account, this. So we don't want to do that to our children. So it's like penny wise or pound foolish. Right now, by forcing my children to meet my expectations and making them feel sometimes guilty, maybe not intentionally, but by doing unhealthy comparisons with others, we may push them to work harder. But actually, in long run, it's going to be very damaging. So those are a few thoughts. It's within our philosophy itself. We want intrinsic self-worth. And karmanyevadhikaraste is something which is applied in parenting, that we do our best in providing facilities to our children, but eventually it is everybody has their karma in terms of the abilities that they have, in terms of the destiny that they have, and we need to accept our children for that. Maybe one or two more questions and then we'll stop.
Thank you so much, Nidhi.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Please accept the envelope.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your nice session. My question is, like you mentioned, kids will have their own vasanas and vrittis. So how do you understand, like, this particular kid has got this particular nature, in the future? And as a devotees, how can we engage that in Krishna service?
Well, astrology can help to some extent, but astrology is a very interpretive field. So the same signs and same planetary positions, different astrologers can interpret in different ways. So we can't rely on it exclusively. I think observing our children is very helpful. You probably know the story when Arjuna married Draupadi or won the hand of Draupadi in Swayamvara. At that time, they were pretending to be in the garb of Brahmanas. But Drupada wanted to know who are they actually. So he invited them for a feast And he got them into a long hall and said, please wait here, we'll arrange the food. And on the other side of the hall, there was a table. On the table, he had kept some paraphernalia for worship and some sacred texts for Brahmanas. He had kept some weapons. He had kept some plowing equipment, and he had kept some tools for artisans. And the Pandavas sat down, they looked around, and they saw the table, and all of them, like one, walked straight to the table and picked up the weapons. And feeling the weapons, they started talking, hey, this weapon like this weapon like that. And Drupada was watching from a secret window, and his son, this was watching, they both started smiling. These are not Brahmanas, these are Kshatriyas. So the idea is that we can try to note what we note consciously, what we notice automatically. That is to help us understand our varna also and our children's varna also. Not so much in terms of 4 categories, but in terms of vritti. If we have a natural interest in something, what do they notice immediately? What do they look forward to? In general, to understand the interests of our children, it's what are they happiest when we give it to them, and what are they unhappiest when they don't get it. That's a good parameter for understanding their interests. So observation is helpful. Generally, ideal is if somebody has the guna and the karma both. See, guna means they have the interest, karma means they have the ability. If they have the quality for that, that means they have the interest in it. Karma means they can actually do it well. Somebody may have interest in music, but they have not ability in music. But if somebody has guna and karma both, that's very special. And that should definitely be developed. Okay.
Prabhu, can I have a question?
Yes. Okay. Yes, Mata.
Prabhu, actually, every parent wants their children to be good in everything. But nowadays, even parents also understanding it might not happen, it won't happen also. So we need to leave everything to children, what they want, what they don't want. That's okay. But when coming to this bhakti, here, parents, we are not forcing them. Like, if you take an example of one parent might think we are not forcing. If we couldn't get opportunity from childhood, so that at least our children getting the chance just to connect with the Lord. But we are, as a parent, thinking in that way, but children thinking in that way, just spending 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. No, not complete day, they are not spending on bhakti. Only like, daily, day-to-day, small things, so that, as a family getting together. So taking in a positive way, like staying together, getting together, eating together as a family. And then, when there is any problem, children can easily, express their, but how to express our views. But children are in a such situation, they are thinking, oh, you're not thinking in this way, you are thinking too much, you're not, because when
Children are saying to parents, you're thinking too much.
yeah,
About
then
what?
what can, like, you're making us to do like this, you're making us to do forcing. If they think in that way, how can we guide them?
Well, there is always some amount of negotiation that the parents may want children to do something, children may want to do something else. So there's always some give and take that is there. That's there in every relationship. But overall, as I said, that if children can feel a sense of value in their terms in bhakti. See, I know one place where this is in America again. The kids were given the responsibility of making the entire temple green, not planting plant, but making it eco-friendly. So the kid did that. Okay, we have these utensils here, we have this dustbin here, this dustbin here. We have to make sure this goes here, goes there. So bhakti has many practices, and bhakti is ultimately about a connection with Krishna. So if we think of bhakti in very limited terms, you should chant this, you should not do this, you should do this, then they may say, I don't want to do this, and you're forcing me. If you think of bhakti as a broad connection with Krishna, then we can also be creative in trying to help them connect with Krishna. I was at one devotee's home in Columbus, and brilliant parents. Oh, very well educated. Both of them are PhD. The kid was also brilliant, but he was into robotics. He was around 11, 12, and he was at like the national level competition. He was already participating and winning in that. So the mother told me that till 7 or 8 he was so interested in bhakti, but and Krishna. Now he has discovered robots and he's forgotten Krishna. So then I started talking with him. I was at their homes. They were talking about robots, and when I asked him some question about robots, it was like Keshav Kashmiri composing 100 verses, Ganga flowing from his mouth, just spontaneously speaking about robots. Then I talked with him and asked, so where do you get ideas for making robots in the competitions that you participate in? This generally most of the funding for robotics comes from Amazon. They want to make more efficient robots. He said, what do you think about? So do you like appreciate innovation, new ideas? He said, of course. So what do you think about making a robot of Krishna which will speak the Bhagavad Gita? Hey, no, that's not a good idea. He went away. Then I talked with his parents, and after 5 minutes he came back. He said, no, actually, that's not such a bad idea. So nobody else would think about it. So, and then after a week, his parents called me and they said, now he's reading the Bhagavad Gita to find out which verses will sound cool on his robot. So now he may not be reading the Bhagavad Gita because he's interested in the Bhagavad Gita, but basically his current interest and bhakti interest, we try to link the two. That's realization. Script, the tradition, and people's current interests. So if we have that idea, then we'll find that connecting them with bhakti is not that difficult. If we have a very limiting understanding of bhakti, right, this is bhakti and this is nothing to do with bhakti, then they may feel it's too restrictive. But children also, they are not foolish. They may be impulsive. Their senses may be strong, their desires may be strong, but I would say that most children that I say, they're not foolish in the sense that they are not completely reckless, they're not totally irresponsible. They know that, okay, this is my family, this is the tradition that I belong to. They don't want to give it up, but they don't want to have to give up their friend circle and social circle just to be a part of the tradition. So if we can help them find a way to belong to both, then I feel that they will be able to take it up. Not everybody will take up in the same way, but they will take it up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Hari Hari.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Krishna. Grace
Thank
Chaitanya
you.
Charan Prabhu ki jai.
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 Very good.
Jai.
Thank you so much. Prabhu.
Hare
Wonderful.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Dandavat Pranam, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu.
Prem Shakti Mataji, you can maybe close your host, Mataji.
Sorry, Prabhu, say that again.
I'm telling you, are host, Mataji. You can close the session, Mataji.
Yes.
Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for the wonderful class. It was very, very useful, and there is a lots of points for us as parents, not only as parents, as Bhakti Vriksha leaders, and those who are dealing with children. There is lots to reflect for us and to apply as well. It was really a wonderful session. I could relate many things because I have a teenage son myself. How to have a discussion as an insider, as an outsider, I could relate. I'm sure everyone, each and every single devotee could relate this as well. We really thank you from the bottom of the heart for such an insightful session. So thanks a lot for your time. In your busy schedule, you've allocated some time for East London devotees. Thank you, Prabhuji. I'll hand it over to Yamuna Mataji if she would like to say.
Hare Krishna. I think Prabhu has already left the call, is it? Yeah, but
Yeah,
anyway,
yes.
it was really amazing, and I think everyone can reflect on the session what Prabhu gave today, and can take some inputs and see how we can apply in our own lives, so that as Mataji said, that we can help the children, in a better way possible, for them to connect to Krishna in a broader sense. So it was really amazing, and thank you all for joining. Harry Bol. See you next week. Hare
Hari Bol.
Krishna.
Hari Bol,
Hare
Mataji.
Krishna.